Okay, we got a very long agenda this morning. It's been a long time since we've had a meeting. So the first item is, information from NISAC regarding Chapter 477 of the laws of 2014. The law clarified and recognized that certain other fireworks should not be labeled dangerous when they pose little or no danger to the public. State statute provides an opt-in for counties to enact a local law to authorize the sale and use of smaller fireworks. Unshackle Upstate is in favor of opting in. We have a letter from B.J. Allen Company, manufacturer, supplier of fireworks, is in favor of us opting in. So, Martin, do you have any comment on it?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I guess what we're talking about here is things like sparklers or sparkling devices, and cylindrical fountains, cone fountains, wooden sparkler dipsticks, party poppers, and what they call snappers. So is that something the committee wants to take a position on? I know I saw in the newspaper, Saratoga County held a hearing on it. I don't know the results of it. Apparently, from the information from NISAC, New York is one of, that there's 47 states that have allowed it. So New York is in a distinct minority as far as states go. And I know it used to be quite common. NISAC said that 47 states in the District of Columbia and Commonwealth of Puerto Rico allow the use of some form of consumer fireworks, sparkling devices. 95% of the U.S. population can legally use some form of consumer fireworks, including the recently legalized sparkling devices in the state of New York. Nearby states, Connecticut, Vermont, and Pennsylvania allow for the sale of sparkling devices.
Mr. Chairman, maybe
yes.
I'm sorry.
I'll defer to Martin if you...
Well, just frankly, looking at the local law for the first time, I could certainly call my colleague in Saratoga County to see what happened at their public hearing and what action they're going to take, if any. I don't know if there's a particular rush to this, but I guess I'd like an opportunity to see what Saratoga County did with this, and also examine the law both at the state level and then this proposed local law. It looks like NISAC's encouraging the adoption of a local law to implement the state law, which is fine. That happens all the time. But unless there's a particular rush to it, I don't know that we need to take this up today. I see in the local law it says sales will only be permitted on or between June 1st through July 5th and December 26th through January 2nd. So even if we were to take this up, we would be able to get this on the books before June 1st.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just around the 4th of July and
right.
And New Year's. Yes, Evelyn?
I was just going to ask, I see Brian is here, and I know he might have the fire perspective from the fire companies, maybe. I was wondering if he had anything to add to the...
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, committee. I have no position either way. This was brought up at our fire advisory board meeting. From the fire side, our big concern with this whole scenario is we need to know if they are or if they're not. Our big problem is Saratoga County has a resolution, and Martin, I have that resolution here that they have completed if you want to see it.
Great.
The bottom line is we go across the bridge to South Glens Falls and you can buy all the stuff you want, and then you bring it here into Warren County. Again, for us, fireworks-wise, fire safety-wise, that is an issue for us. The fact that it's only being sold for a very short period of time, 4 days and 4 days, that's great unless somebody buys a lot of it and then stores it someplace inappropriately in their home or a store or whatever. So, again, the only reason we wanted to bring this to the forefront was so that we know, are there or are there not illegal, legal fireworks in our county, so that from the firefighting standpoint, we have something to know about. like I said, for us, I discussed this with Under Sheriff Lamry. Again, whatever the rule is, the rule we will follow. However, I just get concerned of us being in between states and counties that are selling the fireworks. So, whether it's an awareness situation or we do a local law, that really doesn't matter to me as long as those of us in the fire service actually know what we're doing.
Mhm.
I have a personal opinion on fireworks and seen enough children injured that I have an opinion on that, but you look at the other side, sales tax, increasing sales, would everybody in Lake George love to sell fireworks? Sure. This is something that's gonna have to be bantered back and forth, and as Martin says, I'm not sure anything can be changed, but I do know that Saratoga County will have theirs enacted before we get to that season, so. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Brian. John?
Yeah, is it possible to or if people sell this, to have like a clear, safe, you know, how to use, like if you buy the sparklers, that something that clearly shows you in simple terms how to use it, and if you don't have that, then you can't sell it. Can we make a law or make it, you know, sort of filter out the ones that, or make it a mandatory that they have some sort of clear directions on how to use it? Is that
I
possible?
guess you could have a conditional opt-in.
Who's they, the vendors?
The vendor, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that way, if one vendor doesn't and another does, we would say you can sell it, but you can't.
Well, we're not gonna be permitting that. I mean, you don't have to get a business license from us to sell these things. We're either gonna have a local law that's going to allow them or not. As I understand this, I don't think you have to come and get a permit from the county. I think we're.
Then I guess the answer is no, you can't.
Well, I think it presents complications for us to do something like that.
Yes.
Fred, do you wanna table it until Martin gets, his information from the other county?
Yeah, I think probably that's what we should do. All in favor? Aye, opposed, carried. Okay, so we'll take it up again at the next legislative, which I guess we should have a lot more frequently than we have in the past. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, just one,
yeah.
when can we schedule that meeting though, because this has to be done before a certain time frame in order for some business owners who I've talked to that want to sell these items.
Right.
So, I know our committee doesn't meet but once every
Yeah.
3 months or so.
Yeah,
I
more than
think we
that.
need to put something on the
Well,
docket.
we can schedule another one for the next round.
Otherwise,
Let's- Okay, so,
can I just say one more thing?
yeah, sure, of
Okay.
course.
Now?
Proceed.
Can we pass this with the condition that Martin does his homework or whatever he needs to check on with Saratoga County?
Okay, well, you know, under Robert's rules, we've tabled it.
We've
so-
tabled it, okay.
I mean,
Well,
you know,
then-
unless there's agreement that we take it back off the table. Yes.
Can we schedule the meeting in the next couple of weeks? It's not gonna take long to look into that. And then we don't lose much time and some of us can reflect on it.
So if we do this, so June 1st, right? So here, this is March. So if we did this at the April meeting, legislative meeting, for adoption, for putting together a public hearing, for the May meeting, right? That's possible. So even if we don't schedule a special meeting, Supervisor Westcott, if we do a regular legislative committee meeting before our April board meeting, you could advance this to the April board meeting for a public hearing. You could have the public hearing in May. You could adopt the local law at the May meeting, and you could have this on the books for June 1st.
I work, Supervisor Sokol?
I just don't want us, I know how government works, and I just don't want us to miss out on an opportunity for some of the business owners who I have spoken to
Want to do
that feel that this is I mean, we're talking, I know Brian mentioned that fireworks are fireworks, but they are sparklers, they are poppers. I've sold them at the grocery store before. So, I mean, they're, I don't know. I just,
Well, we had a motion and a second, and we voted to table it,
that's
so
fine,
unless,
that's fine.
unless somebody wants to make a motion to take it back off the table, and we pass that resolution, I don't think we should be discussing it further, other than holding a meeting
Perfect.
maybe in a couple weeks from now.
Put it on the next round.
Okay, so we'll do
Thank you,
that.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next item is, resolution calling on the state legislature to discontinue the implementation of the Common Core state standards, participation in the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers Consortium in favor of an independent state-based approach, the improvement of the education system in New York. Then the second, 2B, is supporting the amendment to New York State Social Studies Learning Standard Number 5, Civic, Citizenship, and Government. Robert Schultz, resident of the town of Queensbury, has asked the committee to consider these requests, plans to attend meeting to answer any questions. Bob, do you want to, discuss it with the committee?
So I think you all have a copy of a letter dated February 3rd, in which those two resolutions are attached. They're attached to the agenda. I'll briefly discuss the civic education suggestion first, and then the Common Core resolution, suggested resolution second. First, the civic education resolution would have the county calling on the State Board of Regents to amend Learning Standard Number 5. You understand, the State Board of Regents adopts learning standards, then curriculums across the state teach to those learning standards. Learning Standard Number 5, Social Studies Learning Standard Number 5, is entitled Civics, Citizenship, and Government. That learning standard is woefully inadequate. For instance, it does not even comply with Section 801 of the state education law, which I'll summarize in quoting. 801 of the state education law requires every teacher of the state, and this law has been on the books since 1941, every teacher of the state shall teach every child of this state in public and private schools from grade 8 on, quote, the history, the meaning, the significance, and the effect of every provision in our state and federal constitutions and in our Declaration of Independence. As a graduate of public schools in 1957, I can tell you I was not taught. My grandchild, Brian Kane, graduated Lake George High School this past June. He was not taught. Nobody's been taught in between. Their children are not being taught, they're not being prepared for their civic lives. They have no clue as to the way the system is designed to work, not the way it's working, but the way it's designed to work. They have no clue as to what's in these important documents, how it got there, why it's there, the power of those provisions. That has to change. Change begins with amending Learning Standard Number 5, Civic, Citizenship, and Government. So I think the resolution is self-explanatory. It's all there. Would encourage the county to call upon the State Board of Regents to amend that learning standard. The second resolution I'm suggesting the county pass is directed at the state legislature. And it would have the county emphatically urging the state legislature to bring New York into compliance, New York State into compliance with the U.S. Constitution by discontinuing the Common Core state standards and ending New York State's involvement in the Race to the Top program and the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers Consortium. there are 4 provisions of the Constitution that, the U.S. Constitution, that the Common Core education system violates. The 4th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and then there are 2 articles. This is all explained in the proposed resolution. The 4th Amendment is being violated in that the Common Core education system is gathering a great deal of private information on every child. Their parents don't have access to that information, nor does the school. The federal government does, and so does third parties. So do third parties. It's a violation of the right to be of their right to be secure in their private papers, effects, and so forth. Also, the 10th Amendment. As you know, the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution prohibits the federal government from engaging in activity that we have not enabled them to engage in. If we have not given them that power, then they're prohibited from exercising that power. Power not given to the federal government is reserved to the states and to the people. The federal government is prohibited from federalizing education in our states, and that's what's happening. Article 1 of the Constitution includes a compact clause. The compact clause says that states are prohibited from engaging in interstate compacts unless the U.S. Congress approves them. We are participating in an interstate compact called PARCC, P-A-R-C-C, which stands for Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. That interstate compact has not been approved by the U.S. Congress. It's a violation of Article 1, Section 10, Rule Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Also, there is a guarantee clause of the Constitution. We are guaranteed by Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution a Republican, for small r, not the party, but the philosophy. We are guaranteed a Republican form of government, Republican in form and substance. In other words, we shall follow the rule of law. We are not governed by the rule of man or the rule of whim. We are governed, to be governed in our states by the rule of law. And the law is being violated. So you have an opportunity here, true to your oath, to support the U.S. Constitution by recognizing that there is an element of the government in the county that is operating outside the law. So we would ask you to pass these resolutions. Again, one directed at the Board of Regents, the other directed at the state legislature. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or try to.
Okay. Questions? Anyone, care to make a motion?
Do you want them together or separate?
Can I just ask
Yes.
one question?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz, and maybe I'm missing it here, have you made any similar presentations to any other counties or any other legislative bodies? And if so, what has the response been?
This is happening now. It's a new initiative across the state. Personally speaking, because I pay taxes to 2 counties and 2 towns in those counties, and to the Lake George school system, I have made a similar letter has been addressed to the Washington County Board of Supervisors. They sent it to their finance committee. I've made a presentation like this to the finance committee. They didn't take action that day. I haven't tracked it to see where they are, but I would hope that they are seriously considering it. And tonight I'll be before the Fort Anne Town Board, and I have made a presentation to the Queensbury Town Board. I see Mr. Stroh here. He might be able to comment as to where it stands, where that resolution stands in the town of Queensbury.
We felt that this issue, which requires more than a quick deliberation, any quick interpretation of the Fourth and Tenth Amendments, Article One, and so forth, wasn't within the jurisdiction of a town board. That this deliberation should probably take place in the court of law, among school districts, amongst teachers, students, and the public at large, but not necessarily your lower level legislative bodies. I don't think we know enough. I don't think we know enough about common cause. I don't think we know enough about your interpretation of the Fourth Amendment or the Tenth Amendment or the Article One. So I think that this issue merits a very strong and thorough deliberation. And to do a 5-minute cursory review of it is an injustice to the topic.
So, I didn't request a 5-minute cursory review. I would have expected, with respect, I would have respected that you would have turned to your town attorney to see if what the facts that are presented in the resolutions are true or not. And then, recognizing that you have taken an oath, you opened the town board meeting, for instance, again, with respect, you opened the town board meeting with a pledge, you know, to support and defend the Republic. And you take an oath to support the Constitution. So here's your opportunity to do that. So don't rush. Have it looked into. Have your attorneys check it for its accuracy before summarily dismissing it, as apparently you might have done. Yes.
Yes, Evelyn was next, and then...
Okay.
I'm still firmly in favor of making a motion, that we adopt both of these resolutions. I can tell you that 2 years ago, I went to Dan Steck's office when they first started implementing the Common Core. I can tell you that the children in my town have suffered under it. There continues to be widespread opposition to it. As a mother with a child in the school district now, I've firsthand seen the experiences of that. And I can tell you flat out that it's the worst thing that possibly happened to our children. And as far as civics and citizen, I concur. The children are graduating our high schools, and quite frankly, they have no idea what happens. They don't know where to go to get a notary, what the town clerk's function is, and any basic things that you need to be aware of for government. Anything that we can do to help increase the knowledge of how the civic process works, I think is a good thing. And as far as the Common Core, I strongly concur that I do not believe the federal government should be telling the states how to educate our children. And I was opposed to it at the beginning, and I remain opposed. I would be happy to see this legislation move forward.
Okay. Mark was next, and then John.
I concur with that, and I would ask, I'll second this, Evelyn, and then, but contingent on a legal review, as Mr. Schultz has suggested.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's fine. I'm generally familiar with these issues, but I'm happy to review these in time for your meeting on March 20th and can report at that time.
Okay, thank you.
John, I think you were next.
Well, my interpretation of Standard 5 was pretty much in line with what I did when I was a teacher teaching government. My students were aware of the state constitution, were aware of local government. As many of you know, they attended many local government functions. So, you know, maybe it's a teacher's interpretation of Standard 5. Maybe it's not Standard 5 itself. I mean, you know, there's so many open-end issues here.
The current learning standard number 5 for social studies is in the resolution. The recommended amendment, how we recommend it read, is also in the resolution. Compare the two. One doesn't even mention the state constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It's woefully inadequate. I might add, for the benefit of the attorney, last September, some folks in the state of Missouri, they belong to there are two assessment consortiums. We belong to PARC. The other one is the SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Missouri belongs to that one. It's the only difference between their state and our state in terms of Common Core. The federal government held out that race to the top money. They took it as we took it. And then the rest is history there and here. But last September, some folks turned to John Sauer, a prominent attorney clerked for the Supreme Court, as an example. And his law firm looked into this. And a complaint was filed in September. Took about 6 weeks to get a temporary restraining order, and then 2 weeks ago, the court found entirely in their favor, permanently enjoining the state of Missouri from funding any further. No funds can go into their assessment consortium. And without the standards and the assessment that they were working towards, obviously the curriculums then have to change. So I have the complaint for your benefit. I have the temporary restraining order. I'm in the process of contacting their court and getting the final decision. As soon as I get it, I'll get it to you. And I think that will help. They won the case primarily on the 10th Amendment, but also on the Compact Clause. The U.S. Congress has, of course, approved various interstate compacts that had to do with education. As an example, there was one nearby, affecting people nearby on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont. Some kids lived on the border, and their nearest school they wanted to go to was in the neighboring state, and that took a compact between those two states. Congress had to approve that, and they did. Here, they have not approved either of these two interstate assessment consortiums. And that and the 10th Amendment is what the folks in Missouri won their case on. So there is important case law now on this subject, and I'll get that to you as soon as I get it.
Thank you. John?
Mayor Diamond and I once went to a class, participation in government, in the 12th grade level class, and before we went, I asked the teacher to explain in depth the local government, and I think, like what John said, I do think local government is explained, but I don't think it goes in as much depth as I would like to see, and they did do that for when Mayor Diamond and I went, and the teacher agreed with me that, the regular teacher agreed with me that they don't focus enough on it, and I would like, to me it would be, I don't know, I think it just needs to be made more explicit, that more in-depth education of local government needs to be done.
Well, I agree with Jim, that, you know, maybe some wording should be added to pay more, you know, that teachers should do more in the area of local government. But are we saying it's a violation of Article A, the 10th Amendment, 4th Amendment? I mean, that's basically what the motion is, from what I understand, that's on the table.
Right.
Do we understand that it is in fact a violation of the Constitution in those ways and formats that were presented here today?
Mr. Chairman,
I think it's pretty,
with
it's
respect,
always been fairly clear to me that the Constitution, you know, delegates certain powers to Congress, and it reserves everything else to the state. So if there is, you know, I guess the only thing that's not clear to me is there definitely nothing in there about education. But
that's true.
when I worked at the court, we were required to read the Constitution every year, and I've read biographies of Jefferson and Adams and Madison, and what you said is consistent with what I think I know about it, but I would love to have it reviewed by the attorney. But
One other comment, if I may, Mr. Stroh and Jim, apparently. You're mixing, I think, the two resolutions. Focusing on this proper civic education resolution, let me say it as plainly as I can. The law of this state, state education law, Section 801, requires every child know what's in these documents, know what's in them, know the provisions, and they have 5 years to teach the children what's in these documents, how they got there, how those provisions got there, why are they there, and the power of them. Our children in Queensbury may have a course which requires they go and attend a town board meeting, but that's not teaching the children what's in these documents, why they're there, these provisions. It's not teaching the children that, for instance, I didn't know that there's a state constitution for the state of New York and that every state has a state until I was 51 years old. And yet, it's the state constitution that governs the behavior of every single elected and appointed official in our state, far more so than does the federal constitution, which hardly ever comes into play in the day-to-day administration of the state. It's the people speaking in that document. No word finds its way in or out unless that change is approved by a majority vote of the people. It's the people structuring the government and regulating the government. Our children aren't taught this. And that's all the change that we're just asking that the learning standard number 5, to which all curriculums must teach to, at least comply with the state law that requires these things be taught. That's all.
Okay, is there any other discussion? If not, I think I'd call the question at this point. And your resolution is on both resolutions, or the motion?
Sort of taken separately, I would move both.
And Mark,
That's fine with me,
second is
yes.
on both?
Yeah.
Okay. So any further discussion? And it is subject to review by the attorney.
Mhm.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none, 2. Okay, so it did carry, 4 to, let's see, better, would you raise your hand if you're in favor again, just so I can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 in favor, 2 against. Okay, carried. Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thank you for your service.
Okay, next is a referral from the Support Services Committee requesting to redefine Section 60 of the General Construction Law as it relates to the exception of the designation of official newspapers for the county. It redefines the section to include an additional exemption for rural counties that may not have a paper that meets the definition as presented in the law. I just asked the county attorney if you'd comment on this, proposed amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was actually discussed at Support Services last week. And there is a bill, it's an assembly bill, and which would modify the definition of official newspaper in the general construction law by removing the language "has a paid circulation." It would also amend the New York Limited Liability Company law to address that the newspapers that are available for those publications would be either distributed on a daily or weekly basis and been in business for at least 1 year immediately preceding any publication, advertisement, etc. This came to my attention from Assemblyman Steck. We've been talking about this since about the first of the year. There was a presentation that was made by Mark Frost from the Chronicle, and the question came up for discussion is, what we are doing with the Post-Star and the News Enterprise and designating those two newspapers as our official newspapers, particularly with respect to the News Enterprise, is that appropriate? I had subsequently done some research and concluded that it is appropriate, that they do meet the current exemption or exception that's in the general construction law. So we're fine there. The question becomes, the larger question for the legislative committee is whether or not we want to try to bring about modification to the current law, which is really kind of ancient and arcane and unworkable in my view, so that municipalities, not only the county, but municipalities throughout the county, throughout the state perhaps, would be able to utilize for their official designations newspapers that do not necessarily have a paid circulation. I think it's important to consider because there are any number of counties, it's my understanding, throughout New York State that may not have a newspaper that has a paid circulation, particularly on a daily basis. We're fortunate that we do. We have the Post-Star, but we don't have a second newspaper that has a paid circulation. We have a newspaper known as the News Enterprise that meets that ancient exemption. because it published so long ago and has continued to be in publication. But they will freely admit, I believe, that they do not have a paid circulation. So, but for the news enterprise, we would not be able to comply with the general construction law, because we have to have 2 newspapers as a county. We have to have 2 official newspapers. So, I've handed out the Support Services Committee, and I'll hand out here, I hope I have enough copies. This is the proposed bill. It's in assembly. I hope I have it. If I don't have enough copies, you do already. And so the question in my mind, Mr. Chairman, is this something that we want to encourage that the state enact this legislation? Do we want to encourage NISAC to undertake this? Do we want to encourage a Senate sponsor? Assemblyman Steck tells me that he has, this is something that he's interested in pursuing and has been interested in pursuing. Or alternatively, Mr. Chairman, do we want to pursue an alternative that would say something along the lines that rural counties, perhaps defined by some population level, would be exempt from the current provisions of the general construction law and could utilize newspapers from that don't have a paid circulation. In the larger cities, Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, Buffalo, New York, they certainly have newspapers in their metro areas that have paid circulation, but in the rural counties, seems to be a problem. So it's brought back to Legislative Committee for discussion.
Okay, anyone care to make a motion at this point, or just general discussion? I think it solves an issue that we've had, at least recently, and I know it's been an issue in several towns, and it is a bill that's supported by our assemblyman, or introduced by our assemblyman. I think we should support it, but, Mark?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, anyone second? Seconded by Supervisor Straub. Any further discussion? I mean, your alternate suggestion, just creating a special rule for rural counties, I think makes sense if this doesn't get any traction in the legislature, but I think it's worthwhile supporting what Assemblyman Steck is proposing at this point. Yeah. Okay, so any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Chairman, I'm just gonna step out for a few minutes. I'll be back.
Okay, thanks. The next item is discussion regarding the governor's proposal in the 2015-16 state budget to create the Upstate Revitalization Account in the amount of $1.5 billion. The account would be a one-time special initiative in which 7 regional economic development areas compete for one of 3 $500 million upstate revitalization grants. The Inter-County Legislative Committee of the Adirondacks believes it would be more equitable and beneficial for all counties within upstate revitalization regions to share the $1.5 billion grant funds by population rather than by competing for the same. So I'd open it up for discussion or a motion. Mark?
Did the Inter-County Legislative Committee of the Adirondacks release some sort of report on this? Did they write something up as to their rationale for why they feel this is a better way to go?
Evelyn?
We have not released a report on it. However, there's been a lot of discussion. The general thought is that we have $1.5 billion, as I understand it's a one-shot, that dividing it up over only 3 of the areas instead of all 7 really isn't beneficial. We all have infrastructure needs. We all have major projects that we need to get done. The subject of the discussion seemed to be that we felt it was more fair, if not by population, then maybe by county, to divide it up and get so many million per county, because all of us have projects that need to be done. To have all of us competing against each other, and then only 3 of us will have their projects done, and it leaves the rest of us kind of sitting there going, okay, now our bridges continue to deteriorate. What do? There's no funding then available necessarily as there would be if this was evenly split amongst all of the counties. Then we could all benefit, all of our people would benefit, and a lot of our projects would get done. Otherwise, I think in many counties, they won't have the money or the wherewithal, and their projects would sit and wait. So this has been a discussion over the last two inter-county meetings, and so we referred it back to the counties for discussion.
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Nat, you move it? Okay, second? Second by
second.
John,
And,
discussion.
well, unless we're one of the counties getting the 500 million.
Yeah. Well, we could phrase it as, if you're not gonna give it to us, then
only
we want it
kidding
to
about
charity.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think it works that way.
Well, I mean, you know, even these regional economic development councils, you know, many of us have worked for years to try to have a strategy Adirondack-wide or region-wide, and then when you created these regional economic development councils, you're competing against each other, and we've got Mohawk, Capital, and North Country that are all competing, and North Country's done really well, and Capital, I think, got it 1 year. But I feel we should share it, because we all have infrastructure needs, and we're not gonna have $1.5 billion to distribute for infrastructure very often in the future, I don't believe so. But, yes, Mark?
That's a really good explanation by, both of you. I appreciate that and support the notion. When I went to the, Kathy Hochul presentation, Lieutenant Governor Hochul, I was personally disappointed in the amount that was allocated for infrastructure improvements. I don't have the numbers in front of me, I don't remember what it was, but I thought it was very low for what our state needs, and, I just bring that up because this may be an opportunity to also lobby for more infrastructure dollars within this $1.5 billion. But I don't have that information in front of me, so I don't really have a specific proposal to make other than just bring it up for the committee. That was my recollection. Were you there for that?
No, I was
And do you know
not.
if the numbers
No, I wasn't there.
were, yeah, I just remember it being very low for, in my opinion, on infrastructure, and I think that money's a one-time shot. Infrastructure is so needed, and I would just like to see more money going towards it.
Mhm. Okay, so do you wanna pass this resolution as it was passed by inter-county legislative, or
No,
do
we
you
don't
want it?
pass it as it was passed by inter-county legislative. I would say that we would want to, take a position opposing, the 1.5 billion being distributed through competition, through 3 regional economic development areas, and instead advocate that it be divided, equally amongst the counties within the area.
Is that
That's fine.
consistent with your motion, Matt?
Perfect.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, next item is John Salvador, but the county attorney, John, the county attorney had to step out, and I would like to have him here, so he's gonna come back shortly, so could we, if we could, we just delay yours and go on to the next item. Referral from the December 19th, 2014 board meeting that the committee discuss and consider possible legislation aimed at introducing mandated reporting and staffing levels for nursing homes. And I think, Rachel, you brought that up, didn't you? You made that request?
Right,
Wanna
and
say
it was
anything
as
about
a result of, I think a couple meetings ago, we were having discussions about, the need to look at mandated, or what our responsibility or influence as a county would be when we look at both, staffing levels, but more importantly, looking at some other states such as Florida that have mandated, elder abuse hotlines. You know, it would be something obviously that the state would be making that decision on, but certainly recognizing the rise in elder abuse in our communities and wanting to be proactive about that, perhaps that was something that legislators could take a look at.
Mhm. Okay, so this says both mandated reporting and staffing levels. I think there is mandated reporting now, but not staffing levels, no?
Not in the state of New York that I'm
No.
aware of. You know, perhaps another supervisor would have more information, but I know we, unlike child protective, abuse, we have a hotline that we call, and all of that is set up, in New York State, but not for elder reporting. And I don't
Okay, so
even know-
you're maybe I'm thinking of something different. You're talking about reporting of abuse in the system? Okay, I was thinking of reporting them on the operation, they have inspections, and they have to do certain reports to the health department.
Jim brought up the staffing levels, that was, I brought up the mandated reporting.
Okay. Jim, do you have a comment on it?
I didn't think I would've, I
Yeah.
thought Peter had done it.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe I'm sorry, I'm confusing you.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Mark?
It's my understanding that there are not mandated staffing levels at nursing homes, and I think that is a problem. I don't really know what you do about it. I mean, so I guess we could pass a resolution that says we recommend the state look into it, but I don't know if this committee is qualified or we have enough information to specifically say what we should do about that. So I think there needs to be some more work by somebody to figure that out
Right.
before we just go forward with the state should have mandated staffing levels. The other part, mandated reporting, there are mandated reporting requirements through the Department of Health. I'm not sure they're exactly what Rachel is asking for about abuse. So I think that needs to be clarified too. So I'm not really prepared to vote on this today. I think there needs to be some more information so we understand what we're talking about here.
Okay, Jim, then
Yeah,
Matt.
when I've read the reports on staffing, the thing they look at is the amount of time with each resident. It's a little bit different than staffing, the amount of staffing. So I think we need to be clear exactly what we're, I mean, you could have a staff, but not, the number might be lower, or could theoretically. So I think we need to make sure we're getting it right when we request it. We can see what my point is,
Mhm.
I hope.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to suggest we move this on to, we're gonna meet in another month anyway, so we can put this on that agenda.
Okay. In the meantime, what's the best way to try to get more information? Maybe through, the Westmount?
Yeah, well, I was gonna
Maybe.
suggest maybe I could talk to Lloyd, and find out what the best direction would be to go about getting some more information.
Okay.
I can do that.
Ian?
You have Lloyd chime in on this too, I mean, it's, here we're selling something, then we wanna mandate staffing levels. Do we have staffing levels for the sheriffs, you know, do we have?
Well, I mean, the one parallel I was thinking of is for our, the county jail, we have staffing levels. So if we can have
Right, and
mandatory
that-
staffing
and
levels
that's where
for
Matt-
inmates, I mean, it seems like even more important that we have it for, the elderly, the people in the
Yes.
nursing home.
We have staffing for the jail, which constituted a report, and then 15 more hirees, which we weren't happy with.
True.
Which brings up a whole nother, but also staffing could go on a road patrols, you know, all kinds of ventures. When I was
Yeah,
in the
well,
fire
we're not
department, we
required
have
to
staffing
have-
levels, different things, so.
Mhm.
I'm just saying that a lot of times you can staff all you want, but it's the people operating that are committing the violations that through inspections, et cetera, you know, bring about the notoriety to the deficiencies of what's going on. So I understand staffing's certainly a way to solve a problem, but I think there's other things that exist, and I don't know if we should get into the, you know, staffing levels.
Hey, John?
I'll second what Dan said, I mean, Mark and Doug Beatty and Jim certainly brought to our attention that there are issues in the nursing home industry. I mean, we may or may not disagree on specialty care being worse or better than the others, but I certainly have to, after reading the articles and some of the other materials that you sent forward, have to agree that in New York State and probably other states as well, there is a nursing home issue. It clearly is the issue, I think what Dan was saying, we could improve what we're doing in our nursing homes, period. How we go about doing that? Just saying you gotta increase X number of people, or should it be more comprehensive than that? I think that's a worthy discussion.
Okay, so it sounds like where we wanna go is to refer this to Westmount for recommendations and recommendations to the full board and to this committee as to how we should address concerns that we've heard about, reduction of staffing on the sale. I think that's what's really prompting this. And, yes, Mark?
Right, I agree with that. I think that it's kind of the situation awareness that we're lacking. We don't really understand exactly what we're talking about here, so maybe Lloyd could come in and educate us on what is and is not in place. And maybe he can make some recommendations on how he would suggest improving it, and we can go
Okay.
from there.
You know, I'm wondering if maybe we're gonna meet with health services before we are with legislative, correct? So I think it would be, maybe we put it on that agenda, then it could be for the legislative if we need to go that route.
Okay, you wanna make that as a motion then?
I will.
Okay,
Oh,
one second,
second
seconded
that.
by Mark. Any further discussion? Yes?
If I may just ask that the second component of that, if you would look into that as well. I guess I was a little confused with when referring it to legislative, I guess my thought was it comes here and as you're doing, you determine what's the correct course of action. But I think that the concern I had is very different from what you guys are talking about as it relates to mandated reporting, which is much more of a state issue. But maybe you could just talk with Lloyd and find out what he knows about that, and if there is, I can call the INSTEC as well, but they are separate issues, so maybe it is something you can run by him.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, carried. Okay, 7 is request for a resolution opposing the governor's new proposal regarding restrictions and new requirements for industrial development agencies. Bud Taylor, chairman of Warren Washington Industrial Development Agency, will discuss the matter, so, Bud.
Just for the record, I'm all in favor of reducing elder abuse, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, please.
I agree.
I thought I'd just mention a few things. What we're asking for is that you pass a resolution opposing the Part W of the governor's proposed 2015 budget. Now, why would I do that? If we look into our own local IDA, I think that our IDA is kind of miles ahead of a lot of the larger ones. And what I mean by saying that is that Warren Washington IDA is the only, I think it's still the only bi-county IDA in New York State. We manage our own operation. We don't ask for any support from either of the counties. All of our income is created by our agency through fees. To give you an idea of some of the current or recent projects that we've had is the Hudson Falls Park Property LLC. That's a project in Hudson Falls on the old bank, converting that to office space and apartments. The Lake George Plaza in Warrensburg and Lake George, and that's the new Price Chopper facility. The JC Property Holdings, which is M&S Precision Machine, that's a brand new facility that's built over in the IDA Park. North Country Veterinarian Referral Center, that's a reuse of the property that used to be the SPCA property up near the airport. That's a facility now that is has all kinds of specialty doctors that you can send your pets to. Tribals LLC, and that's the brewery, the Davidson Brothers Brewery down here on Route 9. And the dormitory project at ACC is a project that came through our Civic Development Corporation. In progress, we've got Hackercraft, Boats by George. That's an additional location over on 149. ICC 4 West, and that's a reuse of the Cambridge Hotel for senior living. So I think it's safe to say that our local IDA is working very well. I'm looking for some notes here. But if we look at IDAs in total in New York State, according to the State Controller's Office, most annual recent report, IDAs are currently assisting 4,521 projects throughout New York. They've created over 114,000 new jobs with a total investment of $73 billion. The average cost to create a new job is $2,588. That far exceeds any other economic development program in the state. So in short, what the state is trying to do is to get us to require us to get approval on giving any income or sales tax or mortgage tax benefits to applicants. And they want to do this by having, after a request goes through our organization, is to submit that to the state and let the Empire State Development make a decision on whether or not we can give the 4% portion of the sales tax. They require that they have 45 days to make that decision. If they don't make the decision within the 45 days, then it's assumed that they approve the project. What that's doing, it's adding 45 days to the time when a local business can get started. So with that information, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer, but I would hope that you'd support the resolution today.
Mark?
I support the resolution. I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion made, seconded by Gene. Further discussion? I think it's, in general, it's consistent with our view that it's better to leave control locally rather than the state, and we can move faster, be more responsive, and be more in tune with the needs of the region. So I support it also. Anyone else? Any further discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Bud. Okay, now we're on to referral from the Criminal Justice Committee for support of resolution urging New York State to fund probation departments 100% for costs related to raising the age of criminal responsibility to 18 years. This was discussed at Criminal Justice, and the probation director was asked to draft a resolution regarding this change, and he has drafted a resolution in support, provided that the costs are 100% reimbursed by New York State. So at tab 8, there's a copy of that resolution, which was reviewed and I believe approved by Criminal Justice. Matt?
I'm on it.
Makes the motion. Seconded by Dan. Further discussion. I think we're all concerned that even if the state does start out reimbursing it 100%, they'll gradually withdraw the funding. But with that caveat, I think it's something we should adopt. Any other discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next is committee table discussion on the request from Assemblyman Steck for review of an act relating to abolishing the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. Actually, I think we need the county attorney for that also. I think we're at the point where we need the county attorney for John South. You know where he is. I know he's meeting with Paul. So, hold a minute until he gets here. John, I think we'll do yours next once he gets here. John Salvador. And do you have not pass out. I got an email
Well, I
when I
got
was driving down here, but,
1909, 1876,
Okay.
1955, 1966, 1992, maps all showing the same thing,
okay,
which is contrary to John's position.
okay.
We're all copying the wrong disk.
But I'll wait till John gets done.
Okay. Yeah, I have that.
I got the map, I thought you were just giving me a nice map, John, to print and put on my wall or something.
Well, no, my map comes from all kinds of different directions. Planimetric from Department of State, USGS topographic map, the county map in 1909, the Queensbury map of 1876.
Yeah, 'cause report any of these, these expensive,
Oh, I know.
Not the same way we do with this.
right,
That's why I
I'm
tried to
just-
make it consistent.
just
But we have staffing, we have to have mandated reporting to hotline, that's something that we have to start contribution.
Downstairs, we want the map.
You what?
Downstairs.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
okay. Okay, well, I guess he'll be up in a few minutes. Maybe we can ask John to start, and then he'll be up here before we're done. So, this is a request from John Salvador, a resident of the town of Queensbury. Committee support the affirmation of boundary locations in the Warren County towns of Bolton, Queensbury, as well as Bolton, Lake George, fixed by 1958-59 Act of the State Legislature. John Salvador is requesting a resolution affirming the boundary lines fixed by that statute, unless more recent credible evidence is forthcoming to the contrary. Hi, Martin.
Hi.
So, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A discovery was made some 15 years ago of a state statute enacted in 1858 and published soon thereafter in 1859, which described all of the boundaries of the various municipalities throughout the state. And I passed out the applicable pages from that statute. The discovery showed that the counties of Warren and Washington, including several of those counties' towns interfacing in and along the east shore of Lake George, were currently recognizing modern-day boundaries inconsistent with those boundaries described in the 1858 statute. There is no evidence to support a notion that the 1858 statute has ever been amended, and no record can be found of any state legislative activity leading to the legitimacy of the current town boundaries. Specifically, in recent years, the boundaries of the Warren, Washington counties of county towns of Lake George, Bolton, and Queensbury, as these towns interface with the Washington County towns of Fort Anne and Dresden, have been out of phase with the clear and unambiguous dictates of the 1858 statute. Where to go with these findings? What to do with the realization that if the 1858 statute was still valid, then, quote, the waters of Lake George were in fact foreign to the towns of Queensbury, Fort Anne, and Dresden. Knowing that what is now part of Part 189.6 of the state's Department of Taxation and Finance official compilation of codes, rules, and regulations requires that the county director of real property tax services is responsible to show on each and every tax map, quote, all those city, town, village, school, and special district boundary lines with their appropriate designations. I brought the text of the 1858 statute to the attention of the County Director of Real Property Tax Services, Mr. Swan, at the time. Shortly thereafter, Warren County tax maps were brought into conformance with the 1858 statute. However, the 3 Warren County towns and 2 Washington County towns have failed to comply with the dictates of the real property tax law in relation to their respect for the use of the tax maps. Section 503 of the real property tax law requires that after all counties have prepared and maintained in current condition tax maps approved by the State Board of Equalization and Assessment, that said tax maps be supplied to each town. It then becomes the duty of the town assessor to utilize such maps in their assessment work. The work of the town assessor includes the compilation of all legally erected improvements within the boundaries of a well-defined parcel of land. Practically every Lake George waterfront landowner exercises his or her littoral right to access the navigable waters of the lake by constructing an accessory structure frequently referred to as a boat dock. If the 1858 statute remains determinative, these accessory structures lining the east shore of Lake George are neither within the boundary of the town of Queensbury and Warren County, nor within the boundaries of the towns of Fort Anne and Dresden in Washington County. The assessor of the town of Queensbury is without authority to include on the assessment rolls accessory structures which fall outside its town boundaries, in this case, the east shore of Lake George. Part 2 of my presentation, you have in your packet a map showing, the first sketch shows what is currently referred to as the town boundaries, and you show them intersecting the Lake George, Queensbury, and Bolton, intersecting the southern basin. A close examination of a section of a Warren County highway map referred to as Exhibit 1 shows the erroneous intersection of the towns of Lake George, Bolton, and Queensbury somewhere in the southern basin of Lake George. There does not appear to be any foundation in the law to support that the location in Lake George of the common boundaries of the Warren County towns of Bolton, Lake George, Bolton, Queensbury, and the Warren County, Washington County towns of Bolton, Fort Anne, and Bolton, Dresden, as shown on Exhibit 1. On the other hand, Exhibit 2 shows the boundary locations around the lake for the towns of Bolton, Queensbury, and Lake George according to the description specified in the 1858 statute. Exhibit 2 also conforms to the boundary definition calls of the Warren County Tax Mapping Agency, the organization responsible for the mapping of the town boundaries. The Warren County Tax Mapping Agency has long since concluded that the 1858 statute has validity, since nothing by way of legislation can be found which might have amended the 1858 statute. Following Exhibits 1 and 2 is the product of the Warren County Planning Department. That's an 8.5 by 11 page. This shows an agreement with that of the 1858 statute that it is valid and that the waters of Lake George are foreign to the town of Queensbury. Recently, I have noticed that the town of Bolton, on inquiry from the U.S. Census Bureau, has claimed its easternmost boundary to be the east shore of Lake George. This, of course, puts 99% of the islands on Lake George in the town of Bolton, as they have been ever since at least 1858. I have tried everything administratively to bring this issue to the attention of the reviewing bodies. I have petitioned to have the tax rolls changed. There is no other vehicle in the assessment process, in the grievance process, to bring this issue to the attention of a review board. So this is the last place I come to, some kind of a resolution that would, first of all, establishing that there's no foundation for the boundaries that we're presently using. I mean, we've been working on this for 15 years. No one has come up with anything to the contrary.
Okay, I mean, it seems to me, I've discussed it a bit with the county attorney, that, I mean, you're raising two questions. What are the proper boundaries, and then what's the jurisdiction over docks and wharves and boathouses?
That is another issue,
Okay.
the jurisdiction. But equally as important, but for right now, the issue that I bring forth is the proper location of the town boundaries.
Right. So I have met with John, and I've reviewed the statute and have discussed it with the county attorney, but one of the things that is not crystal clear to me is exactly what jurisdiction the county has over this. I mean, we're not a court that can decide boundary lines between and among different towns. As I understand it, our tax mapping is consistent with John's argument, and also our GIS system. But I know the town of Queensbury has different views or different maps, with some of which I just got this morning on my phone, so I haven't really had an opportunity to review them, but, yeah. You wanna comment on it, John?
I mean, after 1859, we can go to 1876, where it clearly shows the inclusion of Long Island. Now, in 1876, Long Island and Speaker Heck were probably the same body, because the shoreline of Lake George has fluctuated over the ages with the dams and dam structures on the north end and so forth. So, and those of you that are familiar with Speaker Heck and Long Island, you know that you can walk between the two, so just a small fluctuation in the water level makes them one body, and it even shows it as one body here. Now, I brought this forward, not only does the map show that Speaker Heck and Long Island are in the town of Queensbury, as will 4 other maps that I have, I'll pass around. But it shows you that defining the shoreline as a boundary line doesn't make sense for a whole lot of reasons, because it fluctuates, it changes. Even homeowners change that. And then, are you talking about low, medium, high? I mean, which waterline, shoreline are you talking about? It makes much more sense that there was a meets and bounds descriptions established at one time, and I haven't come up with them yet, but I will pass that 1876 map around. The next map I have, and I'll go in chronological order, is a map of Warren County dated 1909. Now, you have to have pretty good eyesight, but it shows the same thing that all the other maps I'm going to pass around have showed you. The map that in 1955, the United States topographic map showed the border. The 1966 topographic map shows the border. In 1992, New York State Department of Transportation map shows the border. And I'll pass around the old one.
All with disclaimers.
All maps show the same border in the same place, and there have been no legislation that I am aware of that has ever changed that.
As I understand it, though, the tax map and the Warren County GIS concur with John's version, those maps.
My discussions with the Department of State, who are looking for leaps and bounds, that they might be more of a map showing jurisdictional of the Lake George Park Commission or some other jurisdictional thing than, rather than the actual boundary, the northern boundary of the town.
Yes, sir.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. There's a definition in the state law, and if you go through, we researched it when I was on the Park Commission, it is very clear that Speaker Heck, or rather Long Island, is in the town of Bolton. The town of Bolton actually went down into the town of Lake George. If you go back and read the minutes, it's really kind of interesting because they weren't politically correct. Lake George was created, according to the minutes that we found, because of the crybabies in Lake George always complaining. They gave them their own town. This is what's in the minutes. But they didn't give them the water. Bolton kept the water, but gave them the right to the town. But in state law, it is very clear, and it goes with this 1800 one that John has, spelling out exactly where the boundary is. There is nothing that says it's been changed. Queensbury never had Long Island under its jurisdiction. To show you the inadequacy of what we do today, the APA did a thing showing the boundaries and all of that, recently did a pamphlet. And the pamphlet came out and said, Bolton doesn't have any of these waters. Although it's very clear that it's in the law on it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that over the years been done by word of mouth, but if it's not in writing, it doesn't really apply to anything. And Long Island, and you're probably right, depending on the height of the lake, Speaker Heck is or is not connected to Long Island. We raise or lower the lake, but that's why also in the law, it spells out the elevation, from this elevation up or this elevation down, is or is not in whatever town it pertains to. So you can't say, well, raising the lake or lowering the lake. They don't care what the height of the lake is. It's spelled out by law exactly the height. From this height forward is this, from this level down is something else.
I'd like to repeat that, Part 189.6 of the state's Department of Taxation and Finance official compilation of its codes, rules, and regulations requires that the County Director of Real Property Tax Services is responsible to show on each and every tax map all those city, town, village, school, and special district boundary lines with their appropriate designations. There is no place in New York state law that authorizes any other body to map town boundaries. That's the only one.
But as I understand it though, the tax map, you believe their tax map is correct, according to your argument.
For what a tax map is,
Right.
and what a tax map can be used for, they are correct.
But, you know, let's not be mistaken. I am not saying that Long Island is in the town's jurisdiction. I'm merely saying that at one time, since the shoreline of Lake George has varied considerably over time because of the dam and other facets, that, you know, at one time it was one body of water. So you cannot, it doesn't make sense to use the shoreline as a description of a boundary. You need a meets and bounds description of your boundary. That's what's required. However, since the level of the lake has risen over the years, and the one land mass is now two, Speaker Heck and Long Island, the maps do show Speaker Heck as being in the town of Queensbury and Long Island being in the town of Bolton.
The words along the shore, I understand, are nebulous. However, it's not uncommon to include as it winds and turns, and this takes care of its changing course over time. okay? It's understood that a water course can change its location. And that's why surveyors put in property descriptions the words "as it winds and turns." But in 1858, we didn't define shoreline exactly. Said along the shore. And, but we can today. Today, the statutes that have defined the mean low water mark of Lake George, the mean high water mark of Lake George, they're all defined in the law. It's all done for us.
All the maps I presented came after that.
Okay, anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, I understand the conflict here, but my biggest question is exactly what our jurisdiction is in Warren County to decide anything on this other than the tax mapping. I understand that, but I think so I would just ask the county attorney if he would just give us his opinion on
Thank you,
what
Mr.
our
Chairman.
jurisdiction is.
I don't think we need to reach the merits of Mr. Salvador's points here today. I don't think we need to reach whether or not Mr. Salvador has exhausted administrative remedies or whether he hasn't. I don't view this body, this legislative committee body, as an appellate body. The county is a creature of statute. You have certain statutes that you must adhere to. Your jurisdiction, your authority is limited by statute. I think this is something that is within the purview of the various towns that are at issue and also our Director of Real Property Services. But I don't think it's something that ultimately the county, either this committee or the Board of Supervisors, has a say over. So I'd be reticent to have you, reach any recommendations or conclusions here today. I think it is something that would have to be resolved in a different forum. I don't think this is the proper forum to resolve these issues. Again, not stating anything on the merits, whether Mr. Salvador is correct or incorrect, or the dispute among the various maps, et cetera. I just don't think you need to reach those issues. So if Mr. Salvador felt he needed to come here today to put something on the record, that's certainly fine. The record can be preserved for whatever purposes he wants to use it for. But I just don't think this is something that a legislative committee, or the Board of Supervisors for that matter, would or should have a say in.
Yes, Mark.
Just one clarification, Martin. Make sure I heard you right. You said that the Director of Real Property Tax is one avenue for Mr. Salvatore to take in this regard. Are you suggesting that he go see this person, or what?
I believe Mr. Salvador can speak for himself, but I believe he's talked to Lexi about this, and
It was Mr. Swan at the time.
Okay. Right. He did mention that earlier. It was Mr. Swan at the time.
But it's my understanding that you have discussed it with him. That's something that, it seems to me, is within our authority, is the tax maps, and the tax map.
And
They make their determination on what they view as the best evidence, so they've done that though, I think.
But I don't believe you have appellate review over Mr. Swan's decisions as real property tax director.
Right.
That's my point.
But
And I'm not asking
just to clarify it for the committee, I think what our tax map people have done is consistent with your view. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I might add, at the time, I am pretty sure that Mr. Swan discussed this with Paul Dusick, the town attorney at the time, the county attorney at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The county has done the job they are authorized to do. It's done. I have no complaint with the county work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that as the county passes these tax maps on to the towns, the town has not picked up the ball in proper fashion. The town is not authorized to tax structures, be them accessory structures, outside their boundaries. That's clear. And that's what's going on now.
But to the extent you have an issue, your issue is with the towns then, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and as I say, I have complied with every, you know, I copy you on
You
all
have.
of this stuff. I have filed all sorts of applications for, redoing the tax rolls, all of this stuff. Just blind alleys. There's no place in the law to administratively challenge the location of a town boundary. There's just no place in the law. If there is,
Is our, Mr. Salvador, I guess I'm wondering, as I'm listening here to you, I mean, isn't there you're saying there's no place in the law for you to, you know, address your grievance. I mean, there's provisions, in the Article 7 world, in the Article 78 world, entries upon assessment rolls without authority, things of this nature. I mean, that's not for this body to determine, but I think you know, I mean, my feeling would be that there are, if you feel you need to address something, perhaps there are avenues to address these things.
Article 7, I can tell you, does not lend itself to this. I've read every possible grievance I could put in. None of them deal with the town boundary.
But you're...
Short of an Article 78,
but, I mean, your point is, as I'm listening to you, your point is that the towns, the various towns, are taking actions that they don't have the authority to do, or that the Director of Real Property Tax Services here at the county is not compelling or enforcing what should be done at the town level. Do I understand that correctly?
I don't think the Director of Real Property Tax Services has the authority to enforce.
Neither do I.
They have a duty to turn over the tax maps to the towns after they have been approved by the state.
Yes, Ron?
Yeah, I hear you, Martin, but we just passed a resolution that deals with education, and education law, and so I'm not sure, you know, why a jurisdictional argument applies so strongly on what's really a very fundamental question, a boundary between municipalities, within a county. I mean, that's what county government is, isn't it, after all? And I think that the question that Mr. Salvador, if I understand this longstanding issue, is how can the boundaries that are specified in state law, with whatever fluctuations of water elevation may have transpired over that period of time, be so at odds with all of these other maps the surveyors established based on some metes and bounds. I mean, wouldn't that have required an amendment of the boundary within the state law? I mean, these are not, you know, someone just didn't take a map and a ruler, I don't believe, and threw a line down. I don't believe the United States Geological Survey operates that way, and a number of the maps, I believe, they're presented as USGS maps. And so, I guess there's a very, I think, fundamental intermunicipal question that's being raised. It may have a very simple answer, or not, that I think is an interesting question. Does it involve the towns? Yes. But I think it's a legitimate question, a long-standing question, that, and it has a couple of conclusions. I mean, let's just run the scenarios. If a change in the state establishment of boundary has not been made, or was not made, what does that mean? What does that mean? If the Real Property Tax Service established a boundary, based on what? I mean, if our Real Property Tax Service modified the boundary from what was, why did they do that, and what did they base that on? And that's, I think, an important question. If a change to the boundary was made at some point in time of an intermunicipal nature, what was that change and when did it happen? I think these are pretty straightforward questions that, I think the county has, the ability to assist with.
But
Whether
is,
you choose to want to or not is another matter,
but isn't it, Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, it's not, the issue isn't that, Mr. Salvador's issue isn't with the county. Your issue isn't with the county. Your issue is with the towns.
Right, we have two things at the county
and
that
I-
are consistent with your view. One is the tax map, the other is GIS map.
So, I mean, I don't, whether the county changed the boundary line, I'm not hearing that, Supervisor Conover, I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is that, the county has taken certain action that wasn't challenged, hasn't been challenged so far. Mr. Salvador is in accord with the action that the county has taken. That may be at odds with the position of certain towns. I think it's up to the towns to resolve. I disagree that this is something that the county should be getting involved with and doing any more than it already has. That's my view.
The county did change the boundary. At one time,
But-
the waters of Lake George were in the town of Queensbury on the tax maps. And after this statute was brought to Mr. Swan's attention, and he did his investigation, the tax maps were altered, as they are today.
But your point is that they were altered correctly by law.
Yes,
Yeah, pretty clearly, county has the responsibility to create the
Yes.
tax maps.
Yes.
And has done that, though.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I have just one point. When your tax bill comes out for town and county, that includes whether I'm in town of Queensbury, town of Bolton, whatever. So the county is involved in this, whether they're collecting under my tax bills, town and county, taxes are being collected improperly, the county is involved, the county has gotta step in. I have a house in Bolton, I pay taxes to Bolton. There's a XYZ in Queensbury has a boathouse in the town of Bolton, but they're collecting taxes in Queensbury for it. Those taxes should be going to Bolton on it, and if the bill comes out with both names on it, the county is involved.
Another reason why it doesn't make sense for the shoreline to be the boundary of a municipality. They clearly would have drawn that, and I'm sure there's a meets and bounds description. It's just a matter of finding it in some basement in the state.
Right, I think that's, I think that, you know, there's, some of these maps have a foothold. I'm really confident of that. And whether the process was correct or not, whether there was a recognition that, hey, you know, we need to go to state of New York, and we need to change this description, that I'm not sure about, but.
Well,
I mean, there's nothing more, I mean, what Mr. Salvador is bringing up, there's nothing more fundamental to the government than what are your boundaries? You know, the time we were part of the town of Thurman, and Bolton was, then they decided that swampland wasn't gonna amount to much, and they got rid of it. So, that was a joke. So, you know, decisions get made, and but it's at least, I think, a very interesting question, fundamental question that I think does involve the county. And if not jurisdictionally, which some of us might believe it does, at least in terms of some of the homework that could be done to kind of resolve some of these issues, because, again, the United States Geological Survey, I mean, they're usually pretty good about their boundaries. I mean, that's not something they just throw down on a piece of paper. They obviously sourced that in some fashion. What they sourced, how they sourced it, I don't know.
All of these maps that Mr. Stroud brings up, they're always got a disclaimer note on them. Even today, the maps that are
On the
prepared
committee
by.
and then Bob, Mark.
Actually, are we gonna address or answer this gentleman's comment, question about it? Is he accurate in his description of how county and Queensbury taxes are being collected?
I don't know the answer to
I
that
don't-
now. I mean, we have tax maps apparently that show
I mean, I think we're,
Long and Speaker Heck Island in the town of Bolton. And I don't know if the tax bills that go out.
I think if, right, I think if we're gonna answer questions like that, I think in respect to Lexi and Mike, they should both be at a meeting.
I agree with that. So are we going to do that? Are we gonna get back? We'll look into it and address his comments? Okay.
I think we should, and we need to have a meeting in the near future on, other items. We can add this to the agenda and have the real property tax here.
Okay.
Okay, and Bob, I didn't mean to cut you off. You got something you wanted to say?
If the county has approved the maps, tax maps, isn't that then county law? Is that not the law?
The state director has
Right.
approved the tax maps. That's required.
So then it seems to me that that's then law.
Well,
And the county law is being violated.
Well, I don't know that it's being, I don't necessarily have all the facts as far as allegations of violations, but it would seem to me that the county has spoken. The county could be wrong, Mr. Schultz, but the county has spoken as to what the tax maps should look like, and that's apparently been sent down to the state and approved at the state level as well. So I would agree with you that there is some authority behind that from the county perspective. Now, what's happening from that point forward at the town level, I can't speak to that.
From what we heard, at least one town is not in compliance then with the law. And it's your law, the county law. It seemed to me that you would have some,
Well, state law
Within your-
supersedes county law, and we
and,
are in,
excuse me, that you should be able to at least, condemn the town in some sort of condemnatory, resolution, and that you have a role to play. I might also add, fundamentally, citizens of this state, this country, enjoy something called popular sovereignty. Sovereignty rests with the people. There is no question about that. It is one of the hallmarks of America. You can't say that about any country anywhere else in the globe, that the ultimate sovereignty rests with the people. Everywhere else on the globe, it rests with a king or a dictator or parliament or somebody else. Here it rests with the people. And so, John is a citizen of the state, of the country. He has this, he's part of the sovereignty. It seems to me that the government has an obligation, to deal with this effectively. Is the town out of compliance with the law, or isn't it? And that you have a role to play in that.
Okay, so I think we table it for now until we have another meeting in the very near future. Anyone wanna make that motion, just so we've got it clear on the record? Motion by Evelyn, second by Dan, further discussion? If there's no discussion on the motion to table, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, carried.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so John, we'll take it up, we'll continue it. To be continued. Okay, then the last item is, discussion on a request from Assemblyman Stack for review of B 9650, an act to amend the environmental conservation law in relation to abolishing the Hudson River, Black River regulating system, devolving such powers to the Power Authority of the State of New York. Mr. Alfred to provide a summary report regarding the history of the Hudson River, Black River regulating district, powers and duties for discussion at a future committee meeting. So,
This is a pending item?
Yeah. Not prepared to discuss
Well,
at this point.
I mean, this has been talked about for, some period of time. And there was some legislation that, was proposed, and I don't think that legislation addressed my underlying concerns about, to my satisfaction, about, ongoing liabilities and, et cetera. And I haven't seen anything, Mr. Chairman, that has come out of any committee, or has come from anywhere that has followed up on that. I can certainly follow up on it. But I'm gonna say that was 6/9/14 the last time we talked about that. I haven't heard anything since, about that. As far as I know, the Hudson River, Black River Regulating District, devolving such powers to the Power Authority of the State of New York. That was what the legislation was proposed to do, but again, my concern at that time, and it was shared by other county attorneys within the regulating district, that it did not address the ongoing assessments that were being assessed against the counties. Warren County was one of them, and 6 or 7 other counties, as far as the ongoing costs and the prior costs. As you recall, we had some litigation that was resolved, and that there was some assessment costs being assessed to the counties as a result of that. So that was my concern about that legislation then. It continues to be my concern.
Okay, so at this point, it sounds like we really don't have enough information that the county would be protected as far as the history of the Hudson River Regulating District is that there was no cost imposed on the counties until fairly recently, and then they started imposing those costs, and there was litigation over it. And I think the main concern is we don't want to be in a position where that's just transferred to the Power Authority. So
Right. Well, the costs to run the district have to come from somewhere.
Right.
And to be more precise, I don't think that the legislation addressed how those costs are going to be assessed or collected against the counties in a sufficient way.
Right.
So there has to be costs that are assessed. Were they just going to spread them out statewide, or were they going to continue to assess the counties that benefit as a result of the district? And I think it was, one thing to be able to say we're going to abolish the Hudson River Black River Regulating District, and that would be fine. But do we do that for the sake of doing it, or do we do that for the sake of generating an outcome where the counties in the district are going to see some relief and not be assessed and burdened by these costs?
Right. I think there's an underlying federal issue, which is that until a few years ago, the power dams on the rivers were assessed, and then there was some federal case that said that they couldn't assess it, and that's why the district started imposing those costs on the counties.
The Bisha engineering case, as I recall.
Right. So I think that's what we would like to see it resolved at the federal level. So I don't know, it sounds like we shouldn't be taking any position on this. Unless anyone have any different thoughts on the committee? Yeah. Okay, so I guess we just continue it as a pending item. And we can just, I guess one other thing I could do is discuss it with Assemblyman Stack to ask that his bill make it clear that he'd be removing that responsibility, otherwise we can't support it.
I believe the bill came out of an assemblyman from Rensselaer County, as I recall.
Okay.
And I believe Assemblyman Stack was supporting that bill.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, anything else for the committee? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have more of it's a point of clarification. I just wondered if we had, rules, say at the, full board meeting as far as the public comment period and, public hearings. I know in different towns we have rules of, how many times, how long, I just wondered if there was.
Well, yeah, I think that's addressed in the rules that we adopt every organizational meeting.
I don't know how specific it is though, too.
I don't think it is. I think it's something that, Supervisor Simpson brings up a good point. I think it's something that could be considered. You see with the, agendas at the Board of Supervisors meetings, where there's a couple of sections now with privilege of the floor, which I think, we're always trying to improve these, opportunities and avenues for public discourse. We might be well advised to consider implementing something like that at the committee level. It's been my experience since I've been county attorney that each chair handles their committees and how their committees are run, and the meetings are run. But it would would probably merit some further discussion as to, you know, having some uniform rules on committee, how committee meetings are the public participation aspect of that in the committee meetings, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's just unclear, and I'm just, a little concerned of how far that goes if we don't have a law, you know, and some of the big issues that we have.
Brian Canterbury was next, and then Evelyn.
Just to digress a little bit back to the authority question, Fred, if I understand your concern correctly, and I think I do, that I think what it boils down to is representation and responsiveness. And, I mean, we just went through some serious litigation, did we not, relative to how those costs were gonna be apportioned within the district, and I think that going forward, that's a continuing concern, is,
Right.
One of representation. And, you know, we don't necessarily have a great say in how those energy sources are applied, or where they're applied, and for what type of incentives, and within what type of framework. But when the bill comes due, they surely will send it to us, the bill. And I think that striking that correct balance, I think, is very important going forward.
I think to Supervisor Conover's point, I think that there is a framework within the current legislation for district-wide representation. And of course, it's like anything else, you know, a county can have a representative or representatives, as the case may be, who might be very active, and counties may have representatives in a district that may be inactive. But my understanding of abolishing this district and transferring this to the Power Authority means no representation.
Well, that's if I understood that correctly, it's what are going to be, we know we're not happy with the rules as they exist today. Do we know what they're going to be tomorrow? That's where I think is the big question mark.
Well, I guess the other thing that's very important, that the transfer to the Power Authority looks like we would lose whatever little input we have into the process now.
Well, right now, I think we're paying about $240, $260 a year in an assessment, and that's going to continue. There is a mechanism that the district has available to it to change that on notice to us, but that's a big number, and I think we pay that in September or October every year. That's a big number, and it can change. It's not supposed to change. There are, as you know, we negotiated limits as to how much it can change. But you know, I think you have to assume that even when it goes to the Power, even if it goes to the Power Authority, there is going to be a cost assessed to Warren County at some point. And I think what that legislation said was that the proposed legislation said that all powers and duties of the district are hereby transferred to the Power Authority, which means one of those duties is, and one of those powers is, to assess Warren County.
I think there needs to, if I could, I think, you know, there needs to be, if possible, some real detailed discussion in that regard, and exactly what does this mean? We went through literally years of litigation. Years of litigation to get a $250,000 or so annual bill, which we weren't happy about, but that at least had come down from a number that was much above that number, based on a methodology that they thought was fair, that we thought was not fair. What the new arrangement is and what our responsibilities, particularly financial responsibilities, are going to be under the new arrangement is an important question.
Evelyn?
I'm gonna pop back over to Matt right now. I was just gonna say, I read in a publication that the Comptroller's Office, in conjunction with the Association of Towns, had a rules of procedure. It's more for towns, but they had some language in there regarding public hearings, speaking of public hearings, and maybe if we're gonna go and take a look at that, we could look at that as possibly potentially template material. I do think it needs to be addressed, and I think it would be good if we kind of looked around to see what's out there.
Did you have something?
Well, I think it's great to have the public have a chance to speak, but I guess when you have one person that gets up like 7 different times and speaks for 3 minutes each time, kind of like they're monopolizing the whole thing. So I think there should be a point at which you say, okay, you have your turn, speak your 3 minutes, but you aren't gonna get up after every other person speaks so that you can speak again, but that's just my feeling.
Mhm. Okay, Matt?
I think it's more about consistency, so that we can consistently, you know, have the same rule carry through meeting to meeting and issue to issue.
Okay, anyone else? Yes?
It's just a quick comment on Bob Schultz's proposal. If you talk to the kids today who are coming out of school, and I taught college for a while, until I gave it up because I realized I was teaching stuff I learned in high school. The kids today, if you ask them, what's Pearl Harbor? Couldn't tell you. Who did we fight in World War II? Couldn't tell you. Where is the Constitution located? What state? They can't tell you. They had a thing on television yesterday, the kids aren't even taught to write anymore. So the whole school system is totally in chaos, and I think it's about time for something like Bob is talking about to be considered.
Can I just, Mr. Chairman, I know we're maybe getting a little off topic, but it just seems to me that I don't know about all this. I'm gonna take a look at it. I'm gonna as I promised I would, I'm gonna take a look at it. But, I have to disagree. Linda and I have 4 kids. They all went through Queensbury schools. You ask my kids how to register to vote, they know how to vote. You ask my kids about public participation, they know all about it. You ask them about the Constitution, a couple of my kids know more about it than I do. And where did they get that? They got it at Queensbury schools. And so I think while we can always do better, I think we can do better, but I gotta tell you, I think maybe it depends upon the school, maybe it depends upon the teacher, maybe it depends upon the student, maybe it depends upon the family. But I do think that our schools today are doing as best a job they can on this, because I can tell you, my kids know this stuff. They know parliamentary rules of procedure. I'm not sure where they learned it at Queensbury schools and what curriculum, but they learned it somehow, somewhere. So I think, you know, we always knock on the schools, but I, for one, I think when I hear these things, I feel it, as a parent, as a resident, as a taxpayer, if I hear that a school is being knocked on, or our schools generally are gonna be knocked on, I'm gonna stand up for the school, because I'll tell you, where I come from, I'm very proud of Queensbury schools and what they did for our 4 kids. Maybe it's happening elsewhere, but I don't think it's happening in Queensbury.
We're fortunate to have a good teacher.
Mark?
2 quick comments. My second daughter going through Queensbury schools, outstanding school, teaching my kids and preparing them for life. I think Bob's resolutions are more, about state and federal constitutional law, which you're gonna look into. Fred, we had talked earlier in the week about the medical, marijuana initiative that's taking place in Chester, and I had called you to lend my support for that initiative and suggested that the county pass a resolution in support of it. I believe you had said that you were going to, discuss that with the Economic Development
Right.
Committee. Did that pass? And
Yes, it did. I confirmed that.
Okay.
My memory was about like Bud, so he didn't remember. It did pass.
Okay.
And,
Make sure
the
we're
committee
gonna get it.
also asked that we invite them to the meeting on the 20th.
Excellent.
And I contacted them, and they are coming on the 20th.
Thank
And
you.
they're working, they have a PowerPoint presentation, and they were making some modifications on it, but they're gonna bring that on the 20th.
They bring in samples?
No samples. Yes, Rick.
To go back to the issue of the public forum, during the time of the meetings, I know we keep going back and forth between all these different topics.
Mhm.
Is this something that the committee will review and come back to the table with, or where do we stand on that? I think Matt brings up a good point about consistency, and I think, and that highlights the frustration that many of us feel, not because we don't wanna hear what the community has to say, but because we're in such a limited time frame already. You know, if we're gonna not have those types of rules, then perhaps we just need to move our meetings out even longer. But there needs to be a solution, and I was hoping that this is the forum where that gets discussed.
Well, I think it's, you know, we have the rules of the board, but apparently they're not very clear on the public participation. So I think what I'm hearing is that the committee would like to see more detail on what the rules are, and we follow them. I mean, the one example I can think of is the Adirondack Park Agency, because I go there every month, and it used to be they just had a comment period at the end, which I never thought was right, because I thought there's things that are gonna be voted on at that meeting, there should be some opportunity to comment on them before you voted on them. And so I can review this with the county attorney, and, I think what I would suggest is a rule that allows some limited comment before resolutions are voted on, and then some comment at the end, but there's gotta be a time limit, 'cause otherwise you could have 10 people who all wanna talk for half an hour, which just doesn't work, but.
You do have two
Yeah.
privileges of
Okay.
before and after, but there's
Right.
no time limit specified.
Right, and there's nothing in our rules, really, it's just something that the chairman's prerogative,
Well, we did
so.
adopt the two privileges before as part of the rules this year.
Okay.
I think the chairman did.
Right, okay,
Is this, am I hearing this also needs to be addressed at the committee level too? Is that what I'm hearing? More than the board, not just the board meeting, but the committee meeting? I mean, it seems to me
Okay.
you have a situation where with, you have, Mr. Salvador and Mr. Schultz who are making presentations, and they're on the agenda. Folks go online, they see the agenda, they may wanna come to these meetings, and, you know, Mr. Salvador may take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, Mr. Schultz may take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and there may be an opposing view. And so somehow, you're gonna have to work that in, that people who take the time to come to these meetings, and may wanna support, may have an opposing view, whatever the case may be, if we're going to, and I think we should, continue the process of having, you know, the open discussions that we have, and the public discussions and the public debate. We've always been very good about that. I think it'd be a shame if we stopped doing that. But the way that this is set up with a presentation, today's a very good example.
Yeah.
You know, you may have, and there has been public comment here today. You're gonna wanna make sure that you protect the opportunity for those that come here to have their say.
Right.
The only way you're gonna be able to do that fairly, is it seems to me, is if you're gonna put a limit on their comments, you're gonna have to put a limit on the presenter's comments as well.
Hey, Mark?
Just a quick comment to that. I couldn't agree with that more, and I understand that there's, and others' frustrations of this, you know, constant jumping back and forth. So if a Mr. Salvador can come and present for 10, 15 minutes, you know, is that the rule of thumb for everyone? And does that apply for committee and board meetings? I think that's the sort of clarification that I would be looking for in these rules. And then once we agree upon them, we follow them. And then it's clear, and we can let the potential speakers who are coming to the board meeting or the committee meeting know upfront what exactly those rules are, and that they will be upheld in the meeting. So I welcome this, Matt. I think it's a great idea to put some clarification on it. Thank you.
Okay, well, with all the public comment, we've gone for, 2.5 hours? It has been a long time since we had the last meeting, but I think we've covered the topics pretty well, other than the ones we referred to on to the next meeting. But I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Made and seconded. All in favor?
Later, Dan.
Will that work with
Yeah, 'cause I'm like.
You're right on.
Yeah.
Yeah.